It's 6 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. The South Korean government prepares aggressive measures to address the high levels of fine dust in the nation. Billions of dollars will be set aside to clear the sky in tune with clean air policies for 2020. In a gathering of UN officials, scholars, and business figures, representatives from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo call for greater efforts by the international community to implement UN sanctions on North Korea. Some encouraging signs on South Korea's trade front. Exports registered the slowest pace of decline in a year, and the average daily export value reached new heights for 2016. But looking ahead, there is no guarantee this trend will continue. The Korean government has laid out a 5-year plan to tackle one of the country's chronic concerns, fine dust particles. And it's about more than just clearing the air. Kim Ji-yeon starts us off with a move expected to fundamentally change the way the Korean public consumes energy for their daily needs.
The government will set aside a combined $4.4 billion through 2020 for clean air policies amid concerns about the levels of ultra-fine dust in Korea. The Environment Ministry said in a joint press briefing Friday that it will allocate the lion's share of more than $2.6 billion to increase the number of eco-friendly cars in the country, as automobile exhaust is seen as a major polluter of fine dust.
With the cooperation of other related ministries, we've come up with a plan to increase investment in areas that will help boost our plans to clear fine dust from the air.
The Vice Minister also unveiled plans to increase the number of buses running on compressed natural gas, reduce fine dust emissions from coal-fired power plants, and reduce air pollution from ships. He says some of the funds will be pumped into other projects, such as the installation of electric vehicle charging stations nationwide and a 70% tax cut for drivers who replace their old cars with more energy-efficient models. On top of that, he said the ministry is aiming after a trial period to limit the entry of old diesel-powered vehicles into the Seoul metropolitan area by designating a low-emission zone to be announced later this month. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
A bank recapitalization fund worth around $9.5 billion has officially been set into motion. The money will help facilitate the Korean government's ongoing corporate restructuring drive. Our Hwang Jae explains how it will be utilized.
The Bank of Korea's Monetary Policy Board approved a 10 trillion won loan on Friday to help expand the capital base of state-run banks, Korea Development Bank and Korea Exim Bank, which face high debt exposure to foundering local shipbuilders. Concerns had soared about the financial stability of these banks as the government-led restructuring in the shipping and shipbuilding industries gained momentum, leading to the decision to create a recapitalization fund early last month. The BOK's loan approval marks the launch of it. On top of the $8.7 billion provided by the central bank, around $800 million worth of loans will be extended by the Korea Asset Management Corporation, a state-backed entity that helps manage distressed assets. Combined, this sets aside $9.5 billion to assist state banks. The loans will be dispersed through the Industrial Bank of Korea, which will use the capital to buy COCO bonds issued by the state banks. COCO bonds, or contingent convertibles, are widely considered the riskiest debt issued by banks that are automatically converted to equity under set conditions. The funds will be provided upon the request of the two banks throughout the end of next year, but the BOK added there is the possibility of extended assistance. Hwang Jae, Arirang News.
Charges of nepotism and corruption against local lawmakers have dominated headlines in recent days. As a result, parliamentary leaders are seeking ways to cut their privileges and prevent future cases. For details on the coming parliamentary reforms, let's turn to our Shin Se-min.
Korea's three main political parties are working to cut the privileges enjoyed by members of parliament in the wake of growing public anger over a series of corruption allegations involving lawmakers. The reform process will be driven by a new consultative body under the direction of Assembly Speaker Chung Se-kyun. If necessary, the group may even propose law revisions, as some of the privileges are granted by the Constitution. Currently, all sitting lawmakers have immunity from arrest or detention without parliamentary consent. The issue was raised at an emergency meeting on Thursday called by the ruling Sanctions Party, where Floor Leader Chung Jin-seok said the party will work to scale back lawmakers' privileges, starting with the issue of exempting politicians from being apprehended. The two other main political parties are also working to address the issue. Main opposition Minju Party's interim leader Kim Jong-in said unethical practices should be rooted out, starting with the party itself. The party has previously asked one of its lawmakers, Seo Young-kyo, to resign over allegations that she hired her daughter and brothers as part of her parliamentary office staff. And it's not the only party caught up in the corruption allegations. 5 lawmakers from the Sanctions Party were also found to have hired relatives at their parliamentary offices. But the party that's been the hardest hit is the People's Party, whose co-leaders resigned earlier this week to take responsibility for the allegations against 2 of its lawmakers, who are accused of forging contracts with PR agencies and receiving money in kickbacks. It may be too early to tell whether the current corruption cases will motivate lawmakers to root out entrenched unethical practices at the parliament, but hopes for the 20th National Assembly, a month into its term, are high. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
More pressure on nations around the world to tighten the noose on North Korea, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan to press the international community to get more serious about punishing the regime for its nuclear and missile provocations. Kwon So-ah gives us the updates.
South Korea, the United States, and Japan are calling on the international community to actively implement the UN sanctions on North Korea. The UN ambassadors of the 3 countries led a debate at the UN headquarters in New York on Thursday, along with other officials, scholars, and business people, on the assessment and challenges ahead regarding the implementation of Resolution 2270. It was adopted in March after Pyongyang's 4th nuclear test in January. Seoul's Ambassador Oh Jun said North Korea's 4 nuclear tests are evidence of the regime's unwillingness to abide by international rules. He added that making Pyongyang's nuclear development difficult and costly is the only way to curb its nuclear ambitions. U.S. Envoy Samantha Power underlined the importance of the catch-all provision, banning transfers of items that could in some way help develop the North's arms, and called for an enforcement of inspections.
Member states need to make sure that unreported or illicit transfers to the DPRK do not actually occur.
Japan's ambassador Goro Besho emphasized that the issue is not only a threat to countries close to North Korea.
The nuclear question of North Korea, DPRK, is not just a question for immediate neighbors like us, but it is a great threat to the whole world.
Seoul's foreign ministry said in a statement Friday the meeting enhanced awareness of the seriousness of the North Korean nuclear issue. It also said that countries' capability to implement the UN sanctions has been enhanced through a sharing of cases detailing North Korea's attempts to skirt them. On the whole, the meeting also served to press UN member states to submit their sanctions implementation reports to a UN committee. They were supposed to have submitted them within 90 days of the adoption of Resolution 2270, but the majority have yet to do so. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Aside from its relentless pursuit of nuclear upgrades, North Korea is known the world over for its human rights abuses. Washington further illustrates how the regime throws its own citizens into the abyss of human trafficking and slavery. Connie Kim shares with us the U.S. State Department's report.
For the 14th straight year, the United States has branded North Korea one of the world's worst countries for human trafficking, again focusing the spotlight on the regime's flagrant disregard for human rights. The State Department's Trafficking in Persons Report 2016 lists North Korea in its bottom Tier 3 category, with countries like Syria and Iran noting widespread cases of forced labor and sex trafficking in North Korea. The report says North Korea holds an estimated 80,000 to 120,000 people in political prison camps in remote areas, and North Korean workers abroad are forced to work up to 20 hours a day with only 1 or 2 resting days a month.
About human trafficking, we're talking about slavery, modern-day slavery that still today claims more than 20 million victims.
Hitting North Korea with sanctions for its human rights abuses is one option Washington seems to be mulling following the North's test firing of a mid-range ballistic missile last month. The North Korea Sanctions Act enacted in February calls for a comprehensive report on Pyongyang's human rights abuses within 120 days. There's speculation Washington will soon announce sanctions blacklisting around 10 North Korean officials for human rights violations. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports have been on a downward spiral for a year and a half now. At long last, there could be a glint of light at the end of that tunnel as the pace of decline in June slowed to its lowest level in a year. Kim Min-ji has the uplifting digits from the trade front.
Korea's exports may be getting back on the track to recovery. The Trade Ministry says outbound shipments fell 2.7% from a year ago to $45.3 billion last month. It marks the 18th straight month on the slide, but the rate of decline slowed significantly.
Despite a decline in the number of workdays, the pace of decline was the slowest in a year. The average daily export value in June was also the highest since September of last year.
On top of that, exports denominated in the Korean won rose 2.4%, posting gains for a second straight month. The ministry attributed the better performance to a rise in exports of computers and high value-added ships, as well as a slowing contraction in outbound shipments of major export items such as semiconductors and steel. Imports tumbled 8% during the same period to almost $33.7 billion, also falling for the 18th straight month. With that, the trade surplus in June came to over $11.6 billion, extending the surplus streak to 53 months. While the ministry forecasts exports to maintain the recovery momentum, experts say that doesn't necessarily mean an improvement in overall conditions.
Figures have been getting better since the start of the year, but they're still in the negative range. Because exports fell so much last year, it's hard to say they're doing well. Also in June, if you take out exports of vessels, which can be seen as a temporary factor, it's not much of a difference from the previous month.
In the latter half of the year, analysts say there are both favorable and unfavorable conditions looming. Oil prices are expected to gradually pick up and the global economy is forecast to show signs of modest recovery. But Korea's heavy dependence on China could add more downward pressure as Beijing pushes ahead with major restructuring, and Brexit could also weigh down on the global economy. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's consumer prices rose 0.8% last month compared to the same period a year ago, marking the same pace of growth seen in May. According to statistics Korea, weak global oil prices and a drop in agricultural, fisheries and livestock products all played a part in preventing a spike. Most notably, oil prices plunged nearly 10% last month from the previous year. Consumer price growth overall has fallen short of the central bank's inflation target of 2% for the entire first half of the year. In response, the Bank of Korea governor is set to hold a press conference in mid-July. Korea's top financial regulator has warned there's a possibility Brexit will have a long-term impact on markets around the world. The IMF also says uncertainties could pose a major threat to the global economy. Snowballing regret. Here's Lee Min-young.
The post-Brexit shadow could be hanging over the global economy for some time. Financial Services Commission Chairman Im Jong-yong said Friday that even though local markets are stabilizing after being hit hard by Britain's unexpected decision to leave the European Union, uncertainties will linger for some time as no country has ever left the EU. The International Monetary Fund also raised a red flag, saying on Thursday that Britain's shock vote poses the biggest risk to the global economy and calling on EU leaders and other policymakers to take decisive actions.
I'd say Brexit has created significant uncertainty, and we believe this is likely to dampen growth in the near term, particularly in the UK. but with repercussions also for Europe and the global economy.
With the EU and UK facing tough negotiations on Britain's departure, the spokesman said that the IMF is urging both to work together toward a smooth transition of their relationship. Meanwhile, Bank of England Governor Mark Carney on Friday indicated some monetary policy easing would be necessary over the summer in response to the post-Brexit market turbulence.
In August, we will also discuss the full range of instruments to supply that monetary stimulus, if necessary, the full range of instruments that are at our disposal.
The governor's clear signal of action to blunt the Brexit shock pushed sterling down by 1.2% against the dollar. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Korea has confirmed its sixth Zika case in a woman who returned home last week from the Dominican Republic. The 28-year-old had been in the Caribbean nation since June 2014 and came back to Korea on June 23rd this year via the U.S. and Taiwan. This is the first Zika case in 51 days since the fifth one was confirmed in the country. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the patient had a rash and muscle aches starting Monday. She was hospitalized at Seoul National University Hospital on Wednesday and tested positive for the mosquito-borne virus the following day. The patient is not pregnant and is currently undergoing further epidemiological testing under the direction of the CDC. Korea has seen 6 Zika cases so far. 3 were found in people who traveled to the Philippines, 1 to Brazil, and 1 to Vietnam. And that concludes our newscast for this hour. As always, thank you for watching.